if stories about power, obsession, and the histories people tried to erase matter to you, stay with us. These stories survive only because someone chooses to listen. In the low country of Georgia, where the soil was red and the summers pressed down like a hell breath, there stood an estate people spoke of carefully, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because something about it unsettled even those who benefited from its order. The Marlowe plantation did not feel alive. It felt preserved. White columns rose like bones bleached by years of sun. The fields moved on command, bodies bending and straightening in rhythms older than memory. Everything had its place. Everything had its purpose. At the center of it all stood Evelyn Marlowe. When her husband died, the county expected weakness, mourning, disorder. Instead, they found her sharper than before. She dressed in black not as grief, but as declaration. The estate did not pause. Ledgers continued. Punishments continued. Production never slowed. Evelyn believed deeply in structure, in blood, in legacy. She believed some people were meant to command and others to be commanded, not out of cruelty, but necessity. That was how she justified everything. To her, morality was flexible when weighed against inheritance. Her daughters were raised under that same logic. They were educated, polite, carefully managed. Their laughter never echoed too loudly through the halls. Evelyn inspected them the way she inspected livestock: posture, health, compliance. But as the years passed, dissatisfaction crept in. They were refined, yes. Beautiful, yes. But fragile. Too fragile. Doctors visited. Tutors whispered reassurances. Suitors came and left with polite excuses. Evelyn noticed everything. She began writing late at night, filling pages with observations that read more like evaluations and reflections. She is pleasing. One line read, but not strong. Evelyn feared dilution more than loneliness. The Marlowe name was not meant to soften. It was meant to endure. And endurance, she believed, required strength. It was around this time that her attention settled on Josiah. He had arrived years earlier, sold south through hands that never bothered learning his full name. On the Marlowe estate, he was called when things broke: gates, iron fittings, tools that demanded force and patience. He spoke little. He worked cleanly. Overseers noted his obedience, but never mistook it for submission. Josiah was tall, taller than most men on the estate, broad-shouldered, scarred in quiet places where whips had once corrected resistance. His eyes were alert, watchful, always measuring distance. Evelyn noticed that too. At first, she watched from windows, then from closer vantage points. She asked questions framed as management concerns. How long could he work without rest? Had he ever been ill? Did he follow instruction without hesitation? The answers satisfied her. Soon as assignments changed, he was moved closer to the main house. Repairs no longer waited for daylight. He was summoned for tasks that required no explanation. The overseer complied without question. Men like him understood when a request was not a request. Servants whispered. Something was shifting. Inside the house, Evelyn's daughters felt it before they understood it. There was a heaviness in the air, a tightening. The rules changed subtly. Doors closed sooner. Conversations ended abruptly when Evelyn entered. The eldest daughter, Mary Ann, noticed Josiah more than the others, not because she sought him, but because he seemed out of place in a way she recognized in herself. He did not belong to the rooms he was summoned into. Neither did she. One afternoon, Mary Ann watched from a corridor as her mother spoke to him. Evelyn's voice was calm. Josiah stood still, hands folded, eyes lowered in practiced restraint. But Mary Ann saw the tension in his jaw, the careful stillness of someone being measured. Later that night, she asked her mother why he was being brought inside so often. Evelyn did not look up from her writing. Strength should be observed, she replied, not wasted. Mary Ann did not understand then, but unease settled deep in her chest. Weeks passed. Summer thickened. The house grew quieter. Evelyn's journals filled faster. Words like continuity, necessity, arrangement appeared again and again. Josiah's presence became normalized, then expected. He poured wine at dinners, stood near doorways during conversations that never included him. His silence was mistaken for acceptance. It was not. One evening, As a storm gathered outside, Evelyn asked him a question that crossed the line between authority and possession. "You understand your usefulness here," she said. Josiah met her eyes. "I understand my labor," he replied. The correction displeased her. She did not raise her voice. She did not punish him. She adjusted her plan. Mary Ann discovered the truth by accident. A ledger left open. A journal page folded incorrectly. Words written with unsettling clarity. Her mother's vision laid bare. The belief that bloodlines could be reinforced, that bodies could be arranged to solve perceived weakness. Mary Ann's hands shook as she read. This was not about duty. This was not about care. This was control, disguised as legacy. That night, she found Josiah near the forge. "I think my mother is planning something," she said. He already knew. "Plans are always made without us," he replied. But this one, he understood, was different. This one would destroy them both, if allowed to finish. The house slept uneasily that night, and somewhere between candlelight and thunder, a line was crossed, not in action, but in understanding. Once crossed, it could never be uncrossed. The Marlowe house began to feel smaller after Mary Ann learned the truth. Hallways that once echoed with careful footsteps now felt narrow, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Doors closed more often. Curtains were drawn earlier in the evenings. Even daylight seemed hesitant to enter. Evelyn noticed everything. She always had. Her daughter's silences did not escape her. Nor did the way Mary Ann's gaze linger too long on ledgers, on the black journal never far from Evelyn's hand. Suspicion sharpened her already rigid control. Rules multiplied. No daughter was permitted to walk the grounds alone. Meals were eaten precisely on time, conversation minimal. Laughter, once tolerated in small doses, vanished entirely, and Josiah remained where Evelyn wanted him. Clothes. He was no longer assigned to field work. His hands, once calloused from cotton and iron, now carried trays, repaired furniture, adjusted doors that did not need fixing. Always inside, always within reach. To the household, it looked like favor. To Josiah, it felt like containment. Servants avoided his eyes, not out of disrespect, but fear. Fear that association alone might draw the mistress's attention. Older women whispered prayers when he passed. Younger ones looked away quickly. Everyone knew something was wrong. No one knew how far it would go. One evening, Evelyn summoned Josiah to the study. The room smelled of old paper and extinguished candles. Her husband's portrait still hung above the desk, eyes painted stern and distant. Evelyn stood beneath it, hands clasped behind her back. "You are aware," she said calmly, "that obedience is rewarded." Josiah said nothing. "And resistance," she continued, turning to face him, "is corrected." He lifted his eyes then, not in defiance, but clarity. "I ain't confused about where I stand, ma'am." The slightest tightening of her jaw betrayed irritation. "Good," she said. "Then you'll understand what is expected of you." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Josiah did not sit. Evelyn watched him closely, as if measuring weight, height, resolve. Finally, she spoke again, slower this time. "You are strong," she said. "Stronger than most men on this land. That strength was not given to be wasted." Josiah's voice was steady. "Strength don't belong to anyone but the man carrying it." The silence that followed was sharp. Evelyn smiled, thin, controlled. "You speak as if you have a choice." That night, Josiah did not sleep. Neither did Mary Ann. She lay awake listening to the house settle, counting every footstep, every creak of wood. She felt trapped inside something moving toward a conclusion she could not yet name. By morning, Evelyn made her move. The daughters were summoned to the parlor. White dresses laid out on chairs, freshly pressed, identical. For unity, Evelyn said when they hesitated. For presentation. Mary Ann's stomach twisted. Josiah was ordered to stand near the door during the fitting. His presence was deliberate. Evelyn watched him watch them, not with desire, but calculation. Mary Ann met his eyes briefly. He looked away first. Later that afternoon, Mary Ann confronted her mother. "You're frightening them," she said, voice shaking. "You're frightening all of us." Evelyn did not raise her voice. "Fear teaches obedience," she replied. and obedience preserves families. This isn't preservation, Mary Ann said. It's destruction. That earned her a slap. The sound cracked through the room like gunfire. The younger girls gasped. Mary Ann tasted blood. Evelyn leaned in close. You will not speak against me again, she said quietly. Everything I do is for you. That night, Mary Ann fled to the servants' quarters. She found Josiah sitting alone, cleaning an old blade meant for a harvesting cane. His movements were slow, deliberate, controlled. She's lost, Mary Ann whispered. She's going to force this on all of us. Josiah did not look surprised. She's been forcing things her whole life, he said. This just the first time it ain't staying quiet. Mary Ann's voice broke. What do we do? Josiah paused and answered carefully. First, we survive. Then we stop her. From that moment, the lines were drawn. Evelyn sensed it almost immediately, the subtle shift, the way conversations ended when she entered, the way Josiah's compliance felt heavier, deliberate rather than passive. She responded the only way she knew how, with control. She locked doors at night, ordered the overseer to keep watch, restricted movement. She began hosting prayers in the parlor, not for God, but for authority. Her Bible lay open, passages underlined not for mercy, but domination. The house became a cage. Storm clouds gathered again, literal and otherwise. On the evening Evelyn planned her ceremony, the air felt wrong. Thick, charged. Candles flickered without wind. The daughters stood trembling in white. Josiah was summoned. He entered the parlor and understood immediately. This was the moment Evelyn had been preparing for. Mary Ann stepped forward before her mother could speak. No, she said. This ends tonight. Evelyn stared at her, stunned then furious. You will obey me. I won't, Mary Ann replied. Josiah moved then, not aggressively, but decisively, placing himself between mother and daughter. This house ain't holy, he said quietly. And whatever this is, it ain't God's will. For the first time, Evelyn hesitated, just for a breath. It was enough. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, everything Evelyn had built began to crack. The moment shattered something Evelyn Marlowe had never imagined could break. Control. For years, the plantation had moved according to her will. Every voice measured, every step accounted for. Even defiance had always folded under pressure. But now, standing in the candlelit parlor, faced with her daughter's refusal and Josiah's quiet defiance, she felt something unfamiliar coil in her chest. Fear. She masked it instantly. You forget yourself, Evelyn said, her voice low, sharp as glass. Both of you. Josiah did not move. His body was tense, but his posture remained calm, the stillness of a man who had already accepted the cost of resistance. I ain't forgetting nothing, he said. I just ain't obeying evil. That word struck her harder than any insult. Evelyn's hand trembled as she pointed toward the door. Get out, she snapped. Get out of my sight before I remind you what you are. Josiah turned slowly and left the room. Mary Ann stood frozen, heart pounding. Her mother's eyes locked onto her next. You've poisoned this house, Evelyn whispered. You betrayed your blood. Mary Ann's voice barely held. You did that yourself. That night, the plantation did not sleep. Rain arrived just before midnight. Heavy, relentless, pounding the roof like accusation. Thunder rolled low and deep, rattling windows that stood untouched for decades. In the servants' quarters, Josiah gathered a small circle of men and women. No speeches, no promises, just understanding. It's tonight, he said quietly. If we wait, someone dies. Some hesitated. Others nodded without question. Fear had already chosen for them. In the main house, Evelyn paced her study. The black journal lay open on the desk, its pages filled with rigid handwriting now smeared where her hand had pressed too hard. They think they can undo me, she muttered. They think strength bends. She rang the bell sharply. The overseer arrived, soaked from the rain. Release the dogs at dawn, she ordered. Post riders. No one leaves this land. Yes, ma'am, he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Upstairs, Mary Ann sat on her bed, fully dressed, shoes in hand. She had not packed. There was no time. She listened for footsteps, breath held. When the house finally fell quiet, she moved. Barefoot in the corridor, she slipped down the back stairs. Rain lashed through the open doorway. The night smelled of mud and fear. Josiah was waiting. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm swallowed sound. Then Marianne whispered, "I couldn't stay." "I know," he said. They ran. Across the yard. Through the fields. Cotton tore at her dress. Mud swallowed her feet. Lightning lit the plantation behind them. White columns flashing like a watchful ghost. From an upstairs window, Evelyn saw them go. Her scream cut through the storm, raw, unrestrained. Traitors. The dogs were released early. By the time dawn crept through the clouds, the chase was already underway. Josiah led Marianne toward the river, branches whipping their faces, breath burning their lungs. He moved with certainty, every turn memorized through years of quiet observation. Behind them, shouts, dogs, horses. Marianne stumbled, crying out as her foot slipped. Josiah caught her before she fell. "Don't stop," he urged. "We're close." They reached the tree-line just as gunfire split the air. Bark exploded inches from Josiah's head. He shoved Marianne behind a fallen log. "Stay," he said. Before she could argue, he turned back toward the light. What followed was chaos. Shouting, another shot, a cry swallowed by rain. Marianne pressed her hands over her mouth. Tears mixing with rainwater, heart hammering so loud she was sure they could hear it. Then silence. Seconds stretched into agony. Finally, a shape emerged from the darkness. Josiah. Blood streaked his sleeve. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes were clear. "We gotta move," he said. They reached the river as the sky began to pale. The water was swollen, furious, churning with storm runoff. Marianne shook her head. "We can't cross that." Josiah looked once behind them. Torches flickering closer. "We don't got a choice." Hand in hand, they stepped into the water. The current pulled hard, nearly taking Marianne off her feet. Josiah wrapped his arm around her, muscles straining as they fought forward, inch by inch. On the far bank, they collapsed into the mud, gasping. Marianne looked back. In a flash of lightning, she saw her mother standing at the edge of the woods, cloak whipping in the wind, face pale, eyes empty. Evelyn Marlowe did not chase. She watched. The river swallowed them. By morning, the plantation was silent. No songs from the quarters. No commands from the yard. The house stood still, as if stunned by its own emptiness. Evelyn sat alone at the dining table, hair undone, hands folded tightly before her. Mud stained the hem of her dress. Her daughters remained upstairs, terrified, whispering prayers she barely believed in anymore. The preacher arrived at noon. He spoke softly, carefully. "You try to build something the Lord never asked for," he said. Evelyn did not respond. That night, thunder rolled again, and by morning she was gone. Her Bible lay open on the table. One verse underlined in red. "Be not deceived. God is not mocked." No one ever found her body. Morning came to the Marlowe plantation without ceremony. No bell rang. No orders echoed across the yard. The field stood empty, wet cotton sagging beneath gray skies like it had finally grown tired of witnessing human will. Inside the great house, silence pressed in from every wall. Evelyn Marlowe did not come downstairs. At first, the servants assumed she was resting. Grief, they thought. Shock. Even monsters, after all, must sleep. But by midday, unease began to spread. Her daughters remained locked in their rooms, whispering through doors, afraid to call out. No footsteps sounded in the hallway. No commands came from the study. Even the overseer, a man who feared her more than God, stood uncertain at the foot of the stairs. When they finally opened the study door, Evelyn was gone. The black leather journal lay open on the desk, its pages filled with rigid handwriting that grew increasingly frantic toward the end. Ink smudged where her hand had pressed too hard. The final line was written over and over, darker each time. Strength must endure. Strength must endure. Strength must. Her Bible sat beside it, open to a single underlined verse. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. No body was found. Not in the river, not in the woods, not in the house. She vanished the same way she had ruled, without explanation. The days that followed were heavy and wrong. Workers avoided the main house entirely. Those who entered claimed the air felt thick, as if breathing their required permission. Doors creaked open on their own. Candles flickered without wind. At night, footsteps echoed through empty halls. The daughters were sent away quietly to distant relatives. None ever returned. By the end of the season, the Marlowe plantation stood half abandoned. And then the rumors began. Travelers passing the old road said they saw a woman standing at the upstairs window when lightning struck, pale, still, watching the river. Others swore they heard crying on rainy nights, carried by the wind from the water's edge. Farmhands refused work near the property. Animals would not graze close to the trees. Dogs whined and pulled against their chains whenever thunder rolled in. 10 years passed. The house changed owners 3 times. Each family arrived with hope and left with fear. One man claimed he heard a woman whispering prayers through the walls. Another swore a tall figure stood by the oak tree near the riverbank on stormy nights, broad-shouldered, silent, watching the water like it might answer him. A young woman from town once wandered too close at dusk. She later told of seeing 2 shapes near the river, a man and a girl, hand in hand. When she blinked, they were gone. The Civil War came and went. Soldiers camped near the house once, drawn by shelter and curiosity. By morning, they fled, claiming screams that echoed through the walls all night. After that, no one stayed. The plantation rotted. Vines swallowed the columns. Shutters hung loose, banging softly in the wind like a warning. The road leading to the property fell out of use. Locals crossed themselves when storms passed overhead. They called it the Marlowe curse. Some said Evelyn still wandered the halls, searching for control she lost. Others said the river held her. That pride weighed more than water. A few whispered that Josiah and Marianne survived, building a life beyond the reach of the house that tried to claim them. No one could prove any of it, but everyone agreed on one thing. The land remembered. Even now, old men in Georgia will tell you that if you stand near the river during a storm, you might hear voices carried by the rain. A woman whispering about blood and destiny. A man answering with silence. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear footsteps retreating, not toward the house, but away from it, because some legacies deserve to die, and some stories refuse to stay buried. If this story left you uneasy, it should have. History is filled with obsessions disguised as righteousness, and power justified as destiny. And if you felt that chill tonight, remember it. It's the sound of the past reminding us what happens when control replaces humanity.